Hello. Welcome back to
Hello.
PHP Russia online.
Hello.
We've just listened to talk by Nikolas on PHP performance. Now let's extend this and go a bit deeper to discover what other approaches are there. Let's start this panel discussion on PHP performance initiated by Badoo. Big thanks to Badoo for organizing this and for supporting overall the PHP conference. First, let me introduce who's gonna be there with us here. It's Nikolas, Grekas. Sorry, Nikolas, is it Nikolas or Nikolay? I think I didn't hear that.
So, yeah, can you hear me now? It's okay?
Yeah.
So it depends. In Greek, it's Nikolas, or it depends, as you want. I'm fine with both.
Okay. So Nikolas is core contributor of Symfony, as you probably know, and ex-CTO at Blackfire. So I bet he knows a lot about performance. We also have Nikolay Krapivnyy, who's head of Backend department at Badoo and responsible for main Badoo&Bumble apps backend. Hello, Nikolay.
Yeah, hi.
And we have Anton, Titov, co-founder and CTO at SpiralScout, the company that stands behind Spiral Framework, the Cycle ORM, and Roadrunner, a Golang-based application server. I bet we also will hear about this in this discussion. So there is a popular opinion, somewhat popular opinion, that PHP is not really suitable for high-load applications. And if you're developing a bigger project with a heavy load, and you might want to choose some different technology. Well, to kick off the discussion, what do you guys think? Is PHP suitable for high-load projects? And maybe to elaborate that, are PHP frameworks usable? Let's start with Nikolas.
On my side, I think PHP is perfectly fine and is actually one of the fastest runtime engine. So of course, it's suited for high-load things. It's not suited for long-running WebSocket style communication, right? But for all request and response regular lifecycle, it scales. It's easy to code. So I think it's a really wise technology for doing the web. And I think also that's why it's there.
Cool. What do you think, Nikolay?
Yeah, I completely agree with Nikolas. So me as part of Badoo team, I cannot say we are running a huge application in PHP with high load. So I cannot say that it's not suitable. It's definitely suitable. As Nikolas said, I agree that it's not particularly good in some use cases, some event loop like workloads or something like this. But it doesn't mean that you should not do PHP at all. So you can use PHP as a main language for the business logic, for the everything, and if you need some particular use cases, you can choose any other tool if you need. So yeah.
And at Badoo, have you ever considered switching to other technology?
Not really. So we have Badoo as a main language right now. So and we have some performance-based, as I said, use cases written in Golang or C++. But in general, so main, like 90% of the code base written in PHP.
Cool. Anton, what about you? Why do you use Golang? Oh, we can't hear you yet. Anton, are you here with us?
Hello.
Yep, we can hear you now.
Oh, finally. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I had some technical issues.
Basically, is PHP suitable for highload applications at all? And do you guys use Golang if it is suitable?
I mean, yes, it is. Why people still asking this question? I think everyone can see that. I mean, we use Golang to combine it with PHP in a very specific scenarios. Like we are not trying to put it anywhere, but there is always a little bit of the application which is easier to do in Golang. So, I mean, using different tag to cover different problems, I think this is the right approach.
Okay. What about frameworks? I believe Nikolas is using Symfony, and you guys, Anton, your own framework. At Badoo, I'm not sure. You probably can call it framework too. Are frameworks at all suitable for highload applications? Let's say I want to develop a new application, and I'm sure it will have a highload and big traffic. Should I use some framework like Symfony, or should I use Spiral or Laravel, any other framework? Or should I just use components and run my own framework, or just write it from scratch like you guys did at Spiral?
Are you addressing the question to me?
Yeah, be first.
I mean, any application which you're going to create is going to have hot parts and cold parts, like admin panels, billing systems, and etc. So it's always the balance between how much time you want to spend building the app and how much fast you want it to work. Like in our experience, there is maybe like 20-30% of the app which, I mean, you want to focus on performance a lot, like file conversion, transfers, streaming, and everything else. We usually use Golang for that, but there is other parts of the application when you probably don't want to waste half of a year improving the performance when it's just not like called so often. So I would say that the frameworks have their own place in high performance applications. Obviously, it depends case on case. Like I probably won't put any full featured PHP framework behind, let's say, some chat solution like a Discord or Zoom. But I mean, it's always going to be part of the app which you need framework, simply because you don't have infinite amount of time.
Okay. Guys at Badoo, do you use any frameworks anywhere, or is all your code custom written?
We use our own framework, but it has its own reasons to do this. So, but answering your question regarding the framework, I would say that theoretically, yes, why not? But practically, there is two different scenarios from my point of view. The first one is building a new app, and you don't know how popular it will be. Yeah? So you're just building a new app from scratch, and I don't think there is any reason to do your own framework at that point. So it's definitely a good choice to go with from the shelf solution. So we are in 2020, so there is no reason to build a new framework right now for a new project. If you already have one project, if you already have your project and you experience some issues with performance, so now the question is kind of tricky, because I agree with the guys that it's a balance. So at some point, for some project, it's easier to, because if you have project, you already have it runs on something, so it has already some framework behind, or some custom built framework behind. So now you should decide. So do you want to invest your time in improving your current solution, to fine tuning your current framework, or remove it from scratch? So it's kind of tricky. Or sometimes it's just easier to buy the hardware, or invest your money in hardware, and invest your time into the delivering of new features and getting more money from your customers. So to pay the bills for your hardware. Yeah. So basically, it's always a balance. So there is no right solution here, I think. But in general, if you don't know, or if you're not sure, there is no reason for, I would say, for optimization on this side. So you can just use any framework.
Yeah,
thanks. Nikolas, what about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Nikolay just said. there is some crazy amount of effort that happens in Symfony in each individual component. So let's say I have one specific example in mind, which is the routing component. Routing component is just something I think nobody should write on their own, because it would be a too high cost for a too generic piece of code. And I think the routing component has been measured as one of the fastest, or maybe the fastest routing component now, because of the contributions. It doesn't come from nowhere. It comes because of some people spend weekends, spend weeks, and the accumulated amount of brain power that is there is just something you don't want to, or it's something you want to leverage. So on the individual component side, I think it's obvious that you should use this component, for example, if you care about performance. Now there is this other aspect about framework. So Symfony is also a stack framework, and if you start with the full stack framework, you will have some pieces that you might not need in your actual application, some listeners and things like that. But as Nikolay just said, at the beginning, you want to go fast to market and to have something running, right? And the day you want to optimize, you know that you can keep only the few components that provide you the most value, and maybe remove the other parts that you don't care about. Tobias is having a talk on this specific topic, creating your own basically full stack framework by reusing standalone components and only the one you need. And he's doing some crazy performance benchmarks providing with this approach. So I think there is just a spectrum of possibilities, and frameworks and libraries are part of it.
Yeah, regarding the routing, I think this is still the most frequently rewritten package. Like I see on Reddit every month some new router component.
Yes, that's true.
And what are the examples of some highload Symfony applications, websites? Do you have a couple of minds?
There are so many. No, I don't. I should have, but I don't. In France, there are many e-commerce big retailers that are running Symfony. So that's companies. So I'm not sure I can share the names, but there are big retailers that run Symfony. There are many big companies that run Symfony applications under highload, and PHP is also very compatible with the HTTP stack, which means varnish. So if you care about performance, at some point you put some HTTP cache strategy, and varnish will handle any load. So unless you need very long-term connections, varnish, PHP, and any technology behind that, framework and so on works.
Yeah, and how do you guys find the bottlenecks? I believe because you use Blackfire now.
Yes, of course.
Can you elaborate on that?
So Blackfire is, I've been on both sides of Blackfire, so now I'm only on the consumer side. And when I'm using it, it just gives me the solution instantly. So I run something, I'm able to focus or to look at what happens in my application and say, oh, this is not normal. And by following these not normal hints, you get a better clue at what your application is doing, and then you solve issues. So
do you use any other tools?
Load testing tools, but basic load testing tools. So at some point, when I spot an issue with Blackfire, I say, I'm going to do this patch. If I see some benefit with Blackfire, then that's a good hint. Then I switch off Blackfire and I use AB, the Apache bench.
Yeah.
So very basic things. And if I'm able to actually see the same benefits without instrumentation, and I iterate this way usually.
Nikolay, what about you? What kind of tools do you use to find bottlenecks?
So I would start not from the tools, but from the cases when we use it. So the first one is,
how do you approach this at all?
So So the first one is we do what we call capacity planning. So basically, we monitor. What I'm trying to say is that basically we're not trying to find hotspots all time, so constantly. So it's a process when we do capacity planning. We understand that probably we have an issue with some performance stuff, or we have a capacity increase, because usually it's not like you have one issue which raised some problems to you from performance perspective. Usually it's gradually performance is going down slowly, but by doing new features, by introducing new code to your application, and at some point you decide that you should go to do optimization. You should pay the debt is optimization debt. Okay, and for us, we do capacity planning, and when we reach 60% CPU usage for our I would say cluster, we start investing time into performance. And tool we're using is basically two main tools. The first one is we do measure the CPU and time for the API methods we have using Pinba. Mm-hmm. Yes, and basically we start in finding hotspots from the most expensive API methods, or most expensive, or most grown since some time. So the most expensive method, and then we go in deep by using profiler. We use xhashprof. It has some flaws, or it has something that we wanted to improve. That's why we built some I think I would say improved version of xhashprof. Basically it's improved UI version of xhashprof on top of it. So it's called liveprof, so you can find it on our GitHub. So yeah, and we're using it to find hotspots related to CPU. Yeah.
And do you actually run Pinba on production?
Yeah, definitely. So this is one of we run Pinba on production. Wow. And we run xhashprof on production always. Wow. So but Pinba runs for all requests, so it's very cheap, and there is no any effect on the user experience from Pinba, definitely. And regarding xhashprof, we are running xhashprof for like some very small percentage of requests. It's like less than, I think, I can't remember, but it's probably less than 1%. So it's kind of 0.1% of requests or something like this.
Okay, thanks. And Anton, what about you? How do you find bottlenecks in this hybrid kind of applications?
Well, we have a ton of metrics, specifically Prometheus. So just adding as much metrics as you can to your application is going to let you find the spots which require deeper attention, and then just normal profiling tools. So definitely try eshprof. Blackfire probably going to be the go-to tool if you need to find some of the low-level code bottlenecks fast. But we always start with metrics. It's just easier to set them up and see what's happening.
Got it. Can you give maybe there is a question from chat asking about free tools. I mean, open source. Blackfire is not open source, but still, can you give I don't know, maybe one tip for profiling? If you could choose one tip, what would it be?
No, I would say don't over-profile. Like, don't try to optimize something which works fine. Just focus on the parts which definitely require attention. Because you can waste a ton of time trying to optimize something which gives you a couple % benefit for the application.
Yeah. Do you have something to say, Nikolay?
Yes, there's a good suggestion from the guy. So I can say on top that I would not recommend to profile on one request, because it's definitely code has different run paths inside, so there are different ifs and elses and cycles. So for example, if you have lots of business logic inside our app, so for some users, we have more like expensive procession of requests. For some users, it's different. So I would say that my suggestion would be to have some batch or some number of requests and to analyze all of them together in one profile on just one request.
And on my side, I completely I agree. Yeah, so I agree with that. I'm not going to give the same tip, so I'm looking for another tip. Still giving only one. Mine is by experience of from people trying to read the actual data. You know, when you use a profiling tool, you have usually a call graph, and reading a call graph can be something that people don't know how to do. Maybe it's scary the first time. So I've just a simple advice on this one. It's look for a namespace change. What I mean by that is that in the call graph, there are going to be calls to your vendor directories, and there are going to be calls that your application runs. And focus on the moment where a vendor calls your app or the moment where your app calls a vendor. And those specific calls are the moment where you trigger a heavy vendor processing, or the vendor gives you back responsibility and your code takes time. I'm saying that, I'm telling you that because that's the trick many people missed when reading call graphs, saying, hey, this is a big mess, I don't get anything. And the trick is focus on when the namespace changes. That's it. That's a very technical and practical tip, but put it into practice, and I hope it will help you read call graphs.
Yeah, thank you. It's really not obvious, actually. So let's get to another topic. So ORMs. What do you think about ORMs in highload applications? Can we use them, or should we use video? And there was a question to Nikolas from chat. What do you think about cycle ORM?
I don't know. I've never looked at it. I mean, it's on my list of things to look at because right now Symfony applications are too dependent on doctrine ORM. By dependent, I mean that's the only practical choice. And it would be great to have more choice in the Symfony ecosystem, but there is so much work that happened and still happens in the doctrine community that, yeah, of course, we want everyone wants to use and to benefit from the work there. I never had a look at Cycle ORM, but I would be super happy if someone could help me get deeper into it.
Anton.
And by the way, yeah, if anyone has a clue of any other ORM that works great, I would be happy to learn about it also.
Cool. Nikolay, what about you? Do you have kind of ORM? How do you work with database?
I don't know about Cycle ORM, and I'm probably risking of starting a holy war here, but I would say that we are not using ORM at all. Not at all, but in general for the main part of our application, I would say, which is user facing. So there is definitely some ORM like libraries in our back office or like internal tools infrastructure, but in general for our main user facing app, we don't use any ORMs. We just writing plain SQL and getting results from the database by using plain SQL.
Do you think ORMs at all make sense in high-load applications?
It's hard for me to judge. So basically, it's the path we decided to go just because we want to have full control. I would say what's running on our databases. We have our own tooling on top of it. There is a tricky part. I'm not sure. Probably some of ORMs will solve it already, but it's a tricky part always for DBAs to find the root cause of any problems with performance for database. So we have some tooling on top based on SQL queries inside the code. So yeah, so we are happy where we are, and probably at some project, definitely as we discussed before, when you're starting the new projects, definitely you should go as fast as you can to be on market as fast as possible. Yeah, but then we've chosen the path to go with plain SQL.
Anton, what about you?
Well, I think eventually it's going to end that you have to remove the ORM from the hot parts of your code. I'm not having illusions about that. It's the same thing as about frameworks. It helps you to start very rapidly and develop your product to the market and get audience. But then some of the parts of the code you can optimize enough so you just don't need it. Like, that's it. I mean, for the high load projects, it's just case by case. Again, it's going to be part of the projects when you need ORM because you don't want to waste your time, and you much more prefer to waste your time optimizing other parts where you can remove ORM and you can remove frameworks and you can optimize it maybe even on different language stack.
Okay, before we go to questions, I have another topic. Is how do you fight this PHP's traditional handle request and die model? And well, Nikolas talked a little bit about preloading. I'm wondering if you are looking forward to PHP 8 with its JIT. Have you ever already tried it?
I have not tried JIT.
Nikolas, go
ahead.
Okay, Anton, you.
This delay is insane. I have not tried JIT yet. This definitely looks very appealing for the new version of the language. For us, preloading does not make much sense because we keep all the application memory, so we simply don't have this overhead at all, and we don't need to deal with that. We only care about optimization of the runtime of the applications. So preloading is no, JIT yes.
Nikolas?
Just in time won't change much on this. I think preloading is what provides most of the benefit for the request response cycle, and people that use long running processes to serve requests, like Anton just said, don't need preloading. So I think just in time will open maybe new use cases like more low-level processing of data. And that, I think PHP has never been used to do that before. So it's an opportunity, and the community will need to figure out some use cases where just-in-time compilation will actually benefit the community. That's my point of view on this topic.
Nikolay, what do you think? What's preloading?
Yeah, I do believe.
What about JIT?
I do believe that basically the whole moving into the direction of die after request, going from die after request model to some to sharing some data between requests is definitely the next step for PHP to improve performance in general. The next biggest step will be for PHP. Yeah, so for us, we're looking forward both JIT and preload, and we definitely see some benefits, some ways we can benefit from preload. But right now, the only tricky part for us is hot reloading of preload part, because you know that preload part is kind of preload before request start processing. So, but sometimes it changes. Sometimes you upgrade your framework. Sometimes it needs to be changed. So, and is it possible to hot reload?
You don't want to reload the whole application. Yeah.
Yes. So basically, the question is for us, it will be really useful if there will be a solution for reloading this part, or trying to we looking forward right now. So we're analyzing some workarounds around this for us, based on some tooling around, I would say, yeah. But in general, we would be interested in have built-in solution to upgrading this preloaded part with no service stoppage for our users. Yeah.
Right. We have a question in Zoom from audience. Can we add it here to the stream? Is the question ready? We have a hand from Alexander, or okay, we have an Alexander here in a minute. So what's your other favorite feature of PHP 8? It's not maybe related to performance.
All my favorite features related to performance. So this is the only thing we are looking forward to, me personally at least.
All right. So the question is about the container.
So the question is for me. Is it? It's about the Symfony container.
Oh, so sorry. I was missing for a bit. Yeah. So the question is about container, and the question is it possible to make it non-compiling, but still performant, like the working runtime?
Which container are you talking about? Is the question about?
Yeah, I think you have a delay, so.
We have some trouble from Alexander's question, and we still don't know what kind of container he's talking about. Okay, meanwhile, I have a question from my side. Have you guys experimented with alternative VMs? I know that HHVM is kind of not PHP right now, but do you have experience with it, or maybe some other alternative VMs? Like there was one based on Rust and then .NET, PHP or whatever. What do you think of that direction at all?
So on my side, if I can start answering, it's one of the slides of one of my first slides in my presentation about the distributed contribution model of PHP. I think we don't need another engine like the HHVM engine. Maybe it's great, and I'm sure it is, but it fits Facebook's agenda. And that's a very strong force of PHP being a community of skilled and passionate low-level C developers. I'm thinking about Dimitri, Nikita, and many others that contribute to the engine. And that's the part I don't want to lose. So moving to another engine would mean saying bye-bye to all these passionate developers that do an awesome job, That's the thing I want to build on, the people mostly. So I'm not looking for any alternatives.
Yeah, I can continue. So
Anton.
I can.
Nikolay, what do you think?
Yeah, I can agree with Nicholas definitely. So one more point on top of it is using HHVM is kind of it's kind of vendor lock-in, because it's you now are very dependent on what Facebook are going to do with his own VM. So it's for some project it's not an issue. For some project it's definitely an issue. You cannot be so dependent on some technology. So PHP is better, and we did experiments with HHVM, but it was very long time ago. I think maybe it's 2014 or 2015. It was a period when when PHP kind of, I would say, stuck with its improvements, or some evolution of PHP are kind of stuck at that point. But right now, last I think 2 years is impressive. So PHP is growing really fast, and great guys behind this. So yeah, I can say that probably right. PHP is moving really fast right now, and I think probably even faster than Facebook's HHVM. So there is no reason for right now to switch and to see other alternatives.
Yeah, I still remember your blog post on switching to PHP 7 and how you
at that point we tried HHVM. It was as I remember, it was some performance benefit at that point, but it was some maintenance, I would say, cost we needed to pay to move to HHVM. And when PHP 7 was released, so yeah, it was even faster than we expected. So yeah, there was no reason for us to see HHVM anymore.
Anton, do you have something to?
Yeah, I can probably extend on this topic. Nikolay is right. I mean, the PHP is progressing so fast right now that I don't think HHVM or KPHP or PHP can just cope with that. I mean, eventually, if you're going to stick with proprietary VM, you're going to distance yourself from the community. And like a lot of instruments which PHP adds to the current releases are very specific for performance, and they give you a huge boost in what you can do. Like the FF5 feature, which recently appeared in 7.4, this is just, in my opinion, one of the most amazing additions to the language now.
I have another topic based on a question from chat in Zoom. What about these asynchronous tools in PHP, like React PHP, App PHP, and specifically the one from chat, Zully? I know that the HTTP component of Symfony can use app for asynchronous requests. What about this approach at all in PHP applications? What do you think? Should you use it only for like some specific tasks, or maybe for the whole application?
It's a different way of programming using event loops. So then there are many challenges that PHP saved us from solving, like memory leaks and long-running processes. So it's a different way of coding. So I think not every use case benefits from switching, right? So now with the HTTP client, doing async processes of HTTP requests, I've encountered many use cases where it makes the experience so much better on the command line, or using when calling several different web services at once. It's still inside the signal request, but we are running an async loop to fetch several HTTP requests at once. This works well. So on my side, I think it's something we need to make more easier. I mean, to make easier to do safely in Symfony. And I think we are working and we are ensuring that Symfony itself, for example, can be run in a long-running loop. So the kernel, there are people that are running the kernel in a loop process, and that's fine, and that works great. You need special care. You need to never use the session, for example, because the session is, of course, completely incompatible with that. We are making slow progress towards making this more robust, but a big part of this is being driven by allowing people to code kind of safe applications. There are people that are very advanced and that know how to manage all the challenges, but many people in the community are not, and Symfony is trying to figure out some tooling they could use to make it easier. That's, yeah.
Thanks. Nikolay, what about you? Do you use anywhere in your code base asynchronous things? Or what do you think about this approach?
We don't have experience with any asynchronous frameworks. Yeah, so for the event loop based services, so like services which is more like handling network connections, so like heavy, for this we using usually Golang, but we using built-in, I think in MySQL library, so there is a built-in ability to do several MySQL async queries into different connections, so or into one connection, you don't use it yet, I think.
Got it.
So this is the only part. So we have some place in our app when we have like.
Anton, what about you?
We do not use event loops in the applications. We experimented with them, but the benefits they provide, basically every time you're trying to do something with database, it creates a new whole kind of worms to deal with. So we stick to the long-running approach when without shared memory and without reusing it. So we can reuse the whole core of the application, similar way how Symfony does, but we put the memory safety into the architecture of the core. And this just eliminating bootload time, eliminating request parsing time gave us enough benefits to don't worry about event loops for now. We switch to Golang if we need to do something more performant.
Got it. There is a very hot topic from chat. I believe this is the last question for today. What about Docker containers? How many services and nodes we need to have to use Kubernetes or Docker Swarm or something else? Do you guys use containers in your production apps? And what are the tips that you can give in terms of scope of performance? Anton, you go first.
Yes, we do use Kubernetes on many of our production environments. The biggest tip for performance, you need DevOps. You need a guy who is going to be responsible for optimizing Kubernetes all the time, because sometimes it can be a black magic. But in general, in our case, we pack the application and the HTTP layer, in case of Roadrunner, inside the one container. I'm not sure how containerization is going to work when you need to put Nginx in one container and FPM in another. I hear there is a lot of interesting different ways how you can match them together. For performance in containers, I have not found anything very specific. The only advice I can give is that if your system experiences increased loads sometimes, work very carefully on graceful shutdowns and work very carefully on how system reacts to scaling. And I don't think it necessarily is specific to PHP, it's more specific to how you build your architecture.
Yeah. Nikolay, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, I have a technical issue, so if you can, yeah.
Do you guys use containers or Kubernetes or something like that? What are the performance tricks?
Yeah, we use Docker for deploying some services, but we don't run PHP inside Docker, as I know. So basically, we are running our main PHP app on the bare metal.
Got
so
it.
Can't say anything.
Yeah. Nikolas, what about you? Do you have any tips for Symfony applications and Docker containers?
Honestly, not really, because I'm not using them much. I'm using a Symfony Cloud. It runs on containers, and I don't care. I just push the code, and it's deployed for me. And now, honestly, I don't want to care about that. That's not my business, not my area of expertise. And it works, so I don't care. Thank you to the people who make it work.
That's basically what Anton said. You need another guy who does that.
Yeah, exactly. Alexander had a question about container before, and I had a look at the chat on YouTube, and if people were talking about the Symfony container, because that's what the chat is talking about. So I'm hijacking the container word to talk about another container. The Symfony container, the question is, can it be used without compilation, without the compilation dumping the container? And the answer is yes, but you should not, because compiling the Symfony container is a slow process. So unless you can boot a long-running process, like using an event loop, we just talked about that, then you might not have to dump the Symfony container. You might be able to use or to run all the compiler passes before actually serving requests. I'm not sure many people or anyone is doing that, and I'm not sure I would recommend that. Yeah. So sorry, I hijacked your question.
Thank you, guys. This was really interesting, and thanks to Badoo by Magic Lab for initiating this discussion. We all can now continue this discussion in Zoom. There is a Zoom link under stream, so please go there and we'll discuss, and you can ask questions, Nikolas, on his talk and regarding PHP performance in general. And now we're going to have a lunch break, 30 minutes. So we'll be waiting for you at 3 p.m. Moscow time for the next talk. Meanwhile, please go join a Zoom room to discuss PHP performance, because I think we have a lot of other questions unanswered yet. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
See you. There was a question in chat about is there any performance difference between the platforms that PHP runs on, Debian, CentOS, or Windows? I'm not sure if anyone runs PHP on Windows on production.
Yeah, you should not.
Yeah, but what about the different Unix platforms? Maybe, so there's Debian, I guess CentOS, which is slightly different, and then maybe BSD family. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure there are much differences. For Windows, just to be sure that nobody uses it in production, it is incompatible with preloading. So preloading doesn't work on Windows. So yeah. About the other operating system, I know that for Mac OS, if anyone is running a Mac OS server, there might be some issue related to the file system, because the file system is case insensitive, and this is surprising to many applications. There are some bugs that might happen just because of that. So running on a case insensitive file system is maybe not a good idea. Then after that, I don't have any experience, and I don't think it would matter much.
I'm looking through questions, if there were any unanswered. So guys, feel free to speak up and just ask your questions. If you wanna ask, or should you raise a hand so that I can unmute you, right? Yeah, please then raise a hand, and yeah, I can unmute Alexander.
Okay, so sorry for the interruption during the live question. So the question actually was a bit different. I was going to ask, is it possible to make a runtime container that is dependency injection container, not a Docker container, that is as performant as compiled container?
Oh, so this container would not be compiled, right?
Yes.
So you're, okay, I don't think it's possible.
Because the reflection actually speeded up very, very significantly with the recent versions of PHP. So
Yeah.
it's not a huge problem anymore.
Yes, that's true. So it's not a matter of reflection. It's a matter of steps, like steps in the code to create a service. If you look at a compiled container, there is 0 extra steps. You just create the object, and there are almost, maybe there are just no extra lines versus a handwritten container, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So now if there is a generic runtime only container, it has, of course, to run something, which means this something has to take some CPU and so on.
All right, but if we'll, for example, take the Symfony container and remove the, well, custom compiler pass from it at all, so no custom component is able to inject into the compiler pass and make it runtime, maybe it may work fast enough to run it at runtime in production.
Yes. Then usually the container is not the most critical performance piece of code. I don't know, it's not running on the hot path. So because you create a service only once.
Oh, yeah.
So I think, I mean, there are many frameworks that don't use a compiled container, and they are really fine. I'm thinking about Slim. Laravel doesn't use a compiled container. So it's not that, I wouldn't say it's fast, but it works. And there are many others, of course. So yeah, I think Laravel is the most advanced runtime only container, and people look happy with it.
I've seen that the PHP UI is pretty good as well.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, thanks.
People are saying in chat that they develop in code in Windows and they feel good about this.
There is a question in chat. Is it a good idea to perform heavy math algorithmic computations in PHP, like calculations on graphs, processing huge text, process images, some tricky statistics calculations, etc.? That's obvious. Such stuff works faster when writing in C, but what should a regular PHP developer do when he needs to perform heavy computations?
I can try and answer. I don't know if anyone else is answering, or am I the main speaker here?
Nikolay is also here, and Anton is here too. Yeah, so
okay, nice. So I don't have to answer first.
Yeah, I can start if you want. So what PHP developers should do when they need to perform a heavy computation, if they're just a PHP developers, there is no option to go with. So I would suggest definitely go with PHP. Why not? And to see how it goes, and then try and see, and then optimize if needed. Yeah, so usually, so I know that there is some tools like FFI in last version, which can help to build some very simply to build in some C parts, or like writing in C part code into PHP. So yeah, maybe this is a choice to go with. But I would start with PHP, then see how it performs, and then to decide should I find some friendly C developer to help me with, or like just keep it as is.
I would say that PHP has a fairly large toolkit to invoke applications from CLI or other languages. FFI is just new addition. I probably won't even try to write image processing system on PHP. System which will configure a processing, yes, but the actual number crunching, that's just, in my opinion, too desperate to try to do on PHP. So, I mean, I don't think it necessarily suitable well, at least for now. The JIT might show us different picture, but not in every scenario, specifically because memory management is going to stay the same. So I would argue that PHP probably not the best option to be the core of their number crunching software, but it can be everything around their number crunching core in some other language.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just-in-time might provide some things. We'll see. That's this answer I gave before. Like, let's see. Let's give it a try. Someone has to try, and we'll see. There's one case where it makes sense, and it's a kind of specific case. It's when portability matters. I have one example in mind, and the example is the AMPHP framework. We mentioned that also. So they did something completely crazy. It's that they implemented in pure PHP the HPAC HTTP2 compression algorithm. So it's, yeah, they did it because then this client and server, HTTP2 client and server that they implemented is just portable. You need only PHP to run it. That's very good, a good use case for coding that in PHP. Fortunately, they also have a binding to a C library, which is NGHTTP2, so that you can get fast.
There was another question in chat. It was in Russian, so I will translate. So does anyone use Roadrunner on production? This guy who asks the question, he says that Badoo posted a blog post on using Roadrunner, and what was the outcome? If anyone, I mean, in chat used that, you can raise your hand and tell your experience. I will unmute you. I don't know if I can unmute everyone.
No, I can start it. We did some experiments, but we don't use Roadrunner in production right now. It was a blog post around like just testing and measuring how it goes. But I think Anton can give definitely more information on Roadrunners than we do.
I was assuming I was disqualified from answering this question.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We obviously do use it in production for many years. I remember the Badoo article, and just to remind, Roadrunner actually lose to the preloading, and it lose mostly because the payload they've been trying to process was mostly CPU bound. So Roadrunner is not silver bullet. If you have the script which spends 99% in actual runtime, I mean, changing the VM model, long running and not long, won't help you much. But in our scenario, when you have very light API calls, well, we are seeing times and times performance benefits versus to the old approach with FPM for us.
So there is a question in chat. So sorry, can I interrupt? Just quick. Is it needed to rewrite the application for user Roadrunner? So there is a guys in chat discussing.
I can probably answer this as well, right? I mean, the first thing I hear from people who saying like about using Roadrunner is like, but what about memory leaks? It's going to leak memory, and it's always an interesting question for me because for some reason no other developer in other language treat memory leaks as something alien. Like you do need to worry about them, but they're not necessarily happening that often. This is more like a side effect of sloppy code than the way how PHP work. Maybe back in the day when core extensions have been leaking, yes. Now the PHP has very stable memory management model. We run workers with ORMs, with templating engines for, I mean, up to 6 months, and there is no memory leaks in application happens. You do need to tweak your application, like, we essentially had to create a whole framework to make sure that the request response are properly scoped. So there is no way that user data or something can go outside of the request and stay in application a stateful matter. But I think most of the frameworks which has request response model now follow the same approach. I do know that Symfony has finalizers. There is some sort of resetters in Laravel, and there's many tricks how you can use existing frameworks to work under this model without necessarily tweaking your application that much. But obviously, it all ends to the actual code you use. I mean, do the global variable to store a generated user report, and you're done. You can't use it anymore. Obviously, WordPress is a big no-no.
And there's a question in chat about Nginx. So Roadrunner replaces Nginx or what? And should I use Nginx ahead of Roadrunner, like just a proxy? What's the best practices?
I mean, if you're doing a small app which doesn't need much ingress, then yeah, why not? But essentially, you will have to use it, because if you're doing something, let's say in Kubernetes, you need ingress layer, which is going to route requests from one entry point to multiple pods. And well, Roadrunner does not do that. You need Nginx for that. So you are going to have it one way or another. But to set up static files and requests in PHP, you don't need Nginx necessary. But I mean, to get, let's say, better caching, better TSL, you might want to put it in front of.
There's a question, what is the most unusual, interesting optimization you have done? Maybe something very funny.
I can answer this one. On my slides, I had a few lines of code. So I showed some unusual optimization, like comparing that the value did not change before, or did change before putting it into an array. And the most unusual optimization I did is caching small arrays into a bigger array. So in the var.dump component, we have very small arrays that contain only two values. There is key 0 and key 1. And the number of them is small. There are only a few possible combinations of key 1 and key 2, or value 1 and value 2 in the array. And so I put these small arrays into a bigger array, referenced by key and key value number 1 and value number 2 as keys, right? So array key value equals array with the key and the value as a value. Okay, I don't know if my introduction is clear enough. But because these small arrays were used a lot of times, this saved a lot of memory. Referencing smaller arrays many times instead of copying smaller arrays a lot of times.
That reminds me about some blog post by Nikita Popov that was saying that you basically should be using objects instead of arrays almost always.
Yeah, true. In PHP 8, there is a new API to access the tokens, the PHP tokens. And you know, there is token get all that we're using since years, and this returns a big array. And Nikita approved, or in PHP 8, it's going to be an object-oriented way because of the memory benefits that it provides.
Do you use that function, this token function, in Symfony?
Yes, but only in a very specific use cases. We don't do static code analysis except in to spot very specific use cases like special commands or things like that. Or, I mean, almost no.
Got it.
Yeah, I can remember one as well. So I think we saved some CPU on our, we have a kind of cloud cluster which runs our offline jobs. And we enabled opcode cache for CLI scripts. Yeah, and it's counterintuitive, I think, for at least for us at that point was. Yeah, but we have we have long running tasks there, so
that was mass unmute. Okay, who was talking? Just continue.
yeah, so I was describing our experience with enabling opcode cache for CLI scripts, which helps us to save some CPU. And yeah, so it was, at least it was not expected, I would say.
I'm trying to unmute now Anton and Nikolas. Wait a second. Okay, Nikolas is unmuted. Yeah, I asked the host to. Oh, she's saying that anyone can now unmute yourself and just speak up, because I asked, since this is like a Zoom room and we have a discussion, just doesn't make sense for raise hand. You can just speak and unmute yourself and speak. Yeah. Oh, we have Anthony Dovgal in Zoom.
Nice.
Cool. I think. If I'm not mistaken, this is the guy who stands behind the PHP FPM.
At least behind Pinba.
Oh, okay. Yeah, at least behind Pinba. Nice. So maybe he has some question. Or you can ask him question.
Actually, I have a question. So I've heard that, well, I'm not sure who can answer that, but I've seen that there is a new kind of server called Open Lightspeed, and it gives very good performance. And that is not because it's, well, amazing server or something like that, but because they did their own SAPI for the PHP. And they are providing like HTTPS 2 by default and stuff like that, and the response time is milliseconds. It is a bit worse than using Roadrunner as event loop, of course, but it is very impressive. So I wonder if something is planned in the PHP itself for that. Maybe Roman knows him since he's in contact with the core devs closely.
Well, to be honest, I haven't heard about this from Nikita. I don't talk much to other core developers. So no, nothing more than the internals discussions. So I haven't heard about that. Have you seen this in the internals or where?
The Open Lightspeed?
Yeah.
No, it was brought to Ye Framework community by one of the community member, and he was running with the really impressive response time. I've asked how do you achieve that, because I was getting locally with the local PHP server, and with the Nginx, the much worse time, and he said it's Open Lightspeed. I said, what? So I had never heard about it before. It's marked like as experimental or beta. It is meant to be used for WordPress. Well, but it works with anything, and it seems it works quite well.
It sounds like they combined their old Apache approach and they run PHP directly within the HTTP server.
Yeah,
so,
it's like the mod PHP, but different SAPI.
Yep. They can definitely win a lot on just inter-process communication between Nginx and FPM. So impressive.
I'm checking. It's a GPL3, so it's a it's both a closed source paid program and a GPL1. So on internal, it wouldn't fit the PHP license. I don't know if there are some ideas that people could borrow to improve the SAPI on internals. That could be a good idea. But
Well, yeah, but the idea itself was in the mod PHP years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe idea itself is kind of fine. Oh, actually, in the chat, there is another question in Russian. Are there any recommendations about the architecture for dealing with a huge number of WebSockets? Anton, Nikolay?
Well, I mean, I don't think WebSockets exist in as first-class citizen in PHP. I mean, you can only do them with event loops. So you have to address the question to the authors of the framework you use, either AMP or React PHP. We do not run WebSockets on PHP. We run them on Roadrunner's modular and just communicate via PubSub protocol. So just trying to use the right tool for the right thing.
Yeah, I can't agree more. So we use our own WebSocket server as well, but it's just because we did it a long time ago. So I think right now there is lots of choices from the shelf, so you can use. Yeah, why there is no reason to build it right in PHP.
In Symfony, we have Mercure. I don't know if you've heard about the Mercure tooling. So it's tightly integrated with PHP because it listens to an event bus. So it works great for sending messages from PHP, but then it's a Golang process that deals with the long-running connections. So yeah, I think PHP is not suited for that. I mean, it's maybe not the best tool for that.
I had experience with this Ratchet WebSocket server. It's based on React PHP. It worked, I think, quite nicely for a simple case, but developing, as Nikolas said, this is a different mindset when you develop asynchronous applications. So it's so you have to be ready for problems. And if you have time for that, I think that's fine.
I know what that Centrifugo.
This one is nice tool.
Can be used for a WebSocket server. So we do use Centrifugo, but not as a WebSocket server. But we like it. It's a very good tool. So if you're looking for some reliable Golang server, I don't think there is a lack of WebSocket servers on the market right now. But Centrifugo is one of the built by Avita. So by one of the guy who now works on Avita, as I understand. So yeah.
Also creating WebSocket servers on Golang or other languages is a fairly trivial thing. It doesn't require any specific knowledge. It's fairly default instruments.
We have Vladimir who turned on his camera. Would you like to speak, Vladimir, and ask a question?
Yeah, a little bit. So let's add some fire here. So we are talking about PHP and performance, and from my side of view, there is some limits with PHP, and then architecture takes into action. So what is the limit for PHP, and when we should use architectural things to improve our performance?
Well, I can probably start to get the most of the heat. I mean, for us, the limiting factor was the actual model how PHP worked, this dying request response. So, I mean, it did require us to revisit architecture a bit to make sure that application built in a stateless mode, so no things left in memory. But by using that, we've been able to switch to the alternative running mode, daemonized or long running, and cut off all the bootstrap time, all the initialization time, all the compilation of like containers, or etc. So, I mean, there is a ways how you can do it architecturally, but we're talking about the way how the application runs without actually touching the domain level. I mean, obviously, you are going to have a ton of use cases when you need to tweak the architecture of the actual application, but it's case-by-case basis, I would say.
Yeah, as soon as there is no state between requests, basically, PHP fits. And if there is state to maintain, PHP doesn't fit anymore. I think it's that simple, and it's not a limitation of PHP. So if you think about other technologies, they are doing Lambda hosting, and Lambda hosting is basically stateless processing. So it's the PHP model. And I think there is room for both approaches, and they actually must exist because both solve different problems. So PHP is really good at stateless processing. It's not that good at stateful processing. And that's it. That's the criteria to me.
Nikolay, or I can just add something to my question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so from the side of junior developer, we can write everything on PHP, definitely without any doubt. So okay, it's okay, but there is some kind of, for example, we are creating some functionality for search. We're using some database engine, for example, MySQL, and everything is okay. And we are trying to improve our performance, improve our functionality with adding some more code, optimizing our database schema, and so on and so on. But the mainly question is about when we should add something from like other application, from other services instead of writing everything by our own. So like just small addition that at the very beginning, it is what was mentioned in the chat and in the discussion. You need to grab the market share as fast as you can. But then you need to optimize your application. So that means, do you have any thoughts when it should better to use some other components, some other applications, some other products instead of writing maybe there by your own? I mean search, I mean message queues, and so on and so on.
So I can start on this probably. So for me, it's I think you should keep very practical solution here when there is no like silver bullet and answer in general for a question, but in every case you should go with solution you understand what you're trying to benefit for. So if you're saying, so okay, we're now using, for example, search engine, and do we want to build it by ourselves, or do we want to go with some external one and from the market, yes, already one source one? I'm not sure. So you need to answer the question. So what's the conditions you need to serve? So what the team do you have in place to build it, so on. So there is lots of like parameters you need to judge and then to decide. So, and it's not this solution for every cases. It's solution for each time. So when are you going to switch to different framework? I don't know. You should see what benefit. What do you have pain points with current one? So do you have any issues with performance? So I think the main issue with performance is that lots of people are trying to optimize performance when they don't have any issues with performance, basically. So this is the part. So if you don't, probably at some time it's just for small projects. Sometimes it's cheaper just to, I don't know, to buy one more VM on Amazon, or to extend your server to one more and have performance issues solved for one more year. Yeah. So this is my view. So I cannot. Sorry if I can't help you with the exact answer, but this is the life. You know, it's life is life. Life is life.
Yeah, I think there is no exact answer. So I asked this question because of this. Because currently, as I see, a lot of people say that okay, let's split your application into microservices, and we will gain some boost. Let's use some other stuff without even analyzing how it works, and do they really need this stuff? So it's like an open question.
So I can share some experience on this. Maybe you've heard about the book Symfony wrote about Symfony 5. And so the book is written using a Symfony 5 application, and it's using all the, let's say, modern stack. So the modern stack is Redis for session and caching. It's AMQP or RabbitMQ for queue processing. It's using, of course, a PostgreSQL database for storing entities and so on, so the model. And it works, but for an application that is just a demo application writing a book, of course, it's overhead. And we are seeing that people are struggling with having AMQP ready and so on. So basically, it increases the complexity. And the advice here would be to think about the problem and the challenge you have at hand. And so Fabian is working on a version of the book that is going to use Postgre for everything as mentioned. So caching layer, session per session layer, queuing, a PostgreSQL database does the job, and it scales up to good businesses already in many situations. So many people just need the SQL database and it works, and they need to realize that, because you don't need to add complexity in your code before knowing why. So that's first part of the answer. Really, a simple stack is easier to manage. And so people need to think twice before increasing the complexity, even if it's hype, or even if it fits better some mental model of a nice architecture. Redis is really nice, and I really want to use Redis, for example, but maybe I just don't need to. So that's one part of my criteria. And the other part is the business problem you need to solve. So if you want to build some indexing tool, obviously you need Elasticsearch or something similar. I mean, if the tool is doing a business, don't code it again. Use the tool that does it already. So same for Redis. We could say Redis is a stupid key value store. And if you use it as a stupid key value store, maybe you don't need Redis. But Redis also is able to do things that only Redis does well. So if you need to do ranking, you can use the hyperlog thing. And then, of course, you should not use Postgre to do that, because Redis does it better. So yeah, that would be the two things. If the business model is better implemented there, use the tool, use the right tool. Yeah, that's it.
I can probably add something from my end. I'm partially disagree about the approach. I mean, yes, introduction queues and Redis to the application increases the complexity, but these days there is a ways to abstract it enough so developers, even junior levels, can use them effectively. Like if you'll take a look on Laravel, I mean, they're doing a lot of things wrong, but they made a queue be basically available from the start, and developers can use that. And even this approach can ease the application scaling going forward. So we use integrated queues and WebSockets and all this stuff out of the box. We don't require AMQP or any other drivers. We don't increase the infrastructure complexity. We just have them as first-class citizens for the application architecture, so developers can use them. And if we need to scale, we just switch to the different driver. So, I mean, you need to think about having complex and kind of modern instruments to scale your application. Just try not to overcomplicate things, I would say.
I totally agree. I mean, I didn't mention it, but yes, I would recommend this approach because we have the messenger component, and the messenger component would completely abstract out the way the infrastructure. So then the code doesn't need to care about a RabbitMQ or something else.
Same stuff.
Yeah, thank you. So at least we need to have a good reason to add something to our project instead of getting the most hyped things from the market and use it in our application. Because in some cases I saw, I saw some cases when people just say that, okay, we will start with microservices, get something really hyped on IT market, get this and that, and then say that okay, how we can deal with all this stuff, because all these components from the start without good planned architecture or something like this inspire more problems than they solve actually. Sorry, by the way, we have some questions in the chat, like why big companies like Badoo, Avito, I think, and some others use PHP.
Why not?
Why not?
Yeah, it's a good answer, but yeah, it's a good answer, but I think that they expect some like silver bullet solutions that because PHP is fastest, the best, and so on. So
yeah, we started back in 2006, so and since then it was a evolution for us, and maybe at some point it's very expensive for us, and it's very I would say tricky decision to move from PHP to any other language. It's not impossible. Probably at some point we will move. I don't know, but we started with PHP when it was, because we had a team of engineers who knew PHP, so we did know PHP, and yeah, it was an obvious technology for us because it was the best choice for us at that point, and since then we just don't see any reason to move from here.
Okay, it's we've got your idea, I think. And what about Nikolas and Anton?
Same stuff. I mean, why not using PHP? And in my opinion, if they want to use PHP, are they going to be in this spot right now? So people question why they're using PHP. I mean, it helped them to develop product fast enough with enough developers on the market and grow to the position when you have to question your language choice to deal with performance. Not many startups and companies grow to this way. And I mean, Facebook, Wikipedia, Badoo, Avista, I mean, all these companies use PHP, and PHP show that you can actually indeed grow a huge product using this language without worrying about you writing that like immediately. So I think it's a good choice. And these examples and other products shows that it actually have some lags, especially now with all these performance optimizations.
Yeah, PHP is a great engine. It's a really great runtime. The language is improving a lot. And that's one of the best things of PHP 8. We talked about the best features of PHP 8, but there are language features that are awesome. So the language is improving and the engine is crazy good. So just PHP is the right tool. I mean, I don't do video games. If I were to code video games, maybe I wouldn't have started with PHP, of course. But PHP for the web, which is the area where I like working on, it's just the right tool. It's a great technology.
Yeah.
I'm not ashamed of, I'm proud of being PHP developer, and we should all be ready.
Yeah, and I just would say that about video games, you're actually not so right, because our latest meetup, Minsk meetup, we have a demo from Krapivnyy, who actually create a video game using PHP and FFI. So I think that we can use PHP for everything in the near future. Maybe just eliminate all languages. Maybe just eliminate C, because we don't need to write some kind of bindings from PHP to C. We can use them directly. Yeah, but still, yeah. So PHP 7.4 or 7.4 is a good, how to say, just a good step forward with using other technologies from PHP without actually using API and so on. I mean, no, not HTTP API and so on. So, and oh, sorry. We have another question in the chat for the Nikolas. So can we use Redis cache for translations in Symfony instead of arrays? Is it useful for multi-tenant applications with different translation for each tenant?
I would say no. The reason is that translation are always on the critical performance path. So doing a Redis lookup for every single key, or even for batch of keys, I wouldn't recommend that. There is an issue right now in Symfony, which is about providing a way to connect to external sources to get the translation first, and then to use a local array cache. And this is something that some people built outside of Symfony and that we'd like to have native, connecting to outside sources for the first request, I mean, for the compilation step or the caching, the cache warmer steps. So then you would use Redis. You could use Redis to fetch the first request and then have arrays for performance. You could have a look and maybe contribute to the discussion.
Okay, well, why not? As Anton says, not only for PHP, but only for contribution to several frameworks, for different frameworks, because we have more than one framework. Yes, Symfony, most of them using Symfony components sometimes, but still we have different frameworks. Roman, do you want to say something? Yeah,
I'm not a Symfony user, so I don't have to add about
no.
this topic.
It is not about Symfony, but do we have other questions? Because as I see in the Zoom chat, we don't have any.
Yeah, I don't have questions from my side, new questions. So maybe you can continue if you have any.
I can try to add some more fire, maybe, but
please go ahead. This is what we are for here.
Yeah, I need to think a little bit about it, but currently, as far as I see, not currently, but a lot of time ago, and for now, PHP built for dying. They say, a lot of people say so. PHP is going dead, and I heard this about 10 years, maybe more, maybe less. So and currently we have good progress with PHP. For example, version 5.6 was latest version, for example, 4 or 5 years or something like this, and currently we have a new version of PHP every year. What do you think about this? Is it complicated to test your code with a new version of PHP every year instead of using? Is it complicated to test your code against a new version of PHP every year instead of using one version, for example, 2 or 3 years?
PHP versions are very good backward compatible. I mean, every time you bump to a new version, an application fails, we know it fails because we use some, well, not the best practices code. That's kind of amazing because every update is like, okay, I mean, we have to improve architecture a bit. I mean, versus if you'll take a look, let's say an example of Python 2 versus Python 3, this was an interesting upgrade, let's say, when there has not been well compatible and you have to invoke them separately. So regarding the updates, the speed of PHP evolving, it's very fast, and it's amazing that while doing so fast improvements, they are still able to run the applications which we wrote like 10, 15 years ago after some small polishing, but they still run on the latest version. So, I mean, I don't think PHP is dying. It's very, very far away from being dying language.
Dying since 1995.
And the community improved a lot also about shipping binaries. I think it, at least for me, I feel like it used to be more complex to try the latest or to install the latest PHP version. Right now, there are many APT sources for Debian, There are Docker containers. So it's just easy. I can test the next version right now very easily, much more easily than before. So we can try, and on Symfony, we upgrade the CI as soon as possible. We fix the deprecation, the new notices, the new things that might break because of some bad code. And yeah, we are able to iterate and to adopt new version faster.
Yeah, regarding us, I would say that we definitely upgrade for the minor versions, like from 7.4.1 to 7.4, the latest like security updates and everything. Yeah, but for the major changes, we decide on every version. So, for example, if we see some improvements, we go for it. If we like understand that it's like a long time ago, we on the same version, we go for update. For example, we skipped the 7.3. I think we upgraded from 7.2 to 7.4. Yeah, but usually we're trying to keep up. So there is no. So for the latest updates, there is a big. I think we spent maybe several weeks or several months even to prepare for PHP 7. But since then, I don't think it's a big changes.
Okay, so I'm asking this question because, for example, it's more from Symfony world. We're using Symfony framework in production, yeah, fortunately. And there is some issues not connected with the Symfony framework, but connected with Zen framework and currently also known as Laminus framework. And people who works with proxies on PHP, I mean proxies for classes and so on, depends on Krapivny's proxy manager or something like this package. And this package uses Zen framework and uses in the latest version it uses PHP 7.4, and that means that all previous versions depends on Zen framework. And actually, the problem is that Zen framework is not supported anymore, and Laminus defines that they replaces this Zen framework. And when you're installing Laminus, part of Laminus framework, you cannot install Zen framework anymore. And problem is that there is different namespaces, so you have a lot of errors. So problem is that proxy package, proxy manager tries to use the latest version of PHP, and it is way too fast because currently we are using PHP 7.3, and we need to spend I think a lot of time to upgrade, to have everything up to date and so on and so on. So do you think that it could be a problem because currently between 7.3 and 7.4 versions is too short for all developers to upgrade their projects and avoid problems like this?
Wow. So I don't know if Marco is listening, but he has broken versioning policies. We are fighting periodically. I'm fighting politically, of course, periodically on this topic, but I think he's not doing a service to the community by having this versioning policy. And I think that's the only issue. We don't need to work around the issue. If as a community we have a problem with his versioning policy, because he has the right to decide for his versioning policy, and of course I'm very fine with that. But if we have a problem, there's only one way, which is forking this or accepting it. I mean, I don't know if anyone is willing to fork the proxy manager mystery, because it's a crazy piece of code also. So I feel your pain, and I have no obvious solution. I don't know if you have any suggestion, but yeah, that's how I think about that.
Yeah, sure. We can judge from this side. So in this case, it's only version policy instead of problem of PHP. You're right. You're absolutely right. Do we have? Oh, good question from the chat. What would be your best argument for convincing a client to upgrade from PHP 5 to PHP 7? I know that it is really like a pain consider client to upgrade something, to refactor something, to do something which will not give immediate impact on their business, but just get some abstract things. What do you think?
Yeah, I can start from this one. I think once I heard some talk probably from Rasmus, and I heard the best, I think, argument for moving to PHP 7. As I remember, he said that if you want to be environmental friendly company and to save the trees, save the forests and everything, and reduce the heat from your servers and reduce the requirement for cooling your data centers, yeah, so probably you should go with PHP 7. And lots of companies are now looking for be more like green and environmental friendly, so probably this argument will be one of the best ones.
Perfect solution. Any other options?
Well, you can just say that updating from PHP 5 to 8 is going to be more expensive than from 5 to 7. So
also good.
Yeah, I would say because they won't be able to add any new features if they are able to do. I mean, at some point, nobody will be able to use PHP 5, and this moment is approaching.
Also, security reasons. So basically, PHP 5 is not supported anymore. So if there is some security problem, you will not get a fix, right?
you can say you're also going to increase the retention rate of your developers if you're going to upgrade to PHP 7.
Or maybe they are the only PHP 5 on the market, and they already have a great retention.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's some kinds of a problem because anything about possible security breaches doesn't work because they say, okay, let's talk about, in some cases, let's talk about this when we get some. For me, I have my private pane. Currently, we are migrating from Zen Framework 1, Zen Framework 1, to the Symfony framework, and it get me about 1 year to convince our clients that we should definitely move from Zen framework to the Symfony framework because Zen framework died and first of all died and so on and so on. Client understand my thoughts. CTO understand my thoughts about this, my reasons, but finally, business should take a decision about this and give us some money as usual, because we are trying to work for the money. Give us some money to do this, and currently we are on the way. But yeah, it took a lot of time.
Yeah, but there is a bunch of reasons. So once again, so security reasons is definitely one of the important ones, because there is if security breach happens, there is very late to do something. So there is a very, I'm not sure this is a valid argument against this, because
if it's good,
this can escalate to some public relation issues, right?
Yep.
Security is not only technical; it's business, because when your image is, when your reputation is at risk, then it's critical for the business. So maybe you can scare them this way.
Yeah, sure. So it looks like we don't have questions anymore. Maybe because a huge part of our audience is on with new speaker on the stream.
Okay, I added some related to our topic, some links might be helpful for someone. So let's finish with it.
Yeah, I think we can conclude. We have one more thing to decide is the best question, but I have I want to propose to nominate Vladimir as a best source of questions.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
If you don't mind, guys.
Hit generator.
Yeah, hit generator. So Vladimir, you should reach out to. I will contact you, or you reach out to me in Telegram, and we'll give you some gift.
Okay, no problem. In the case of any issues, you can reach me via Igor Chelidinov.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay.
For sure, because we are both from Minsk.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you for the good discussion and for fun discussion with fun answers. They made my day about environment-friendly companies. It was the perfect answer, I think.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, bye.
Thank you, guys. See you
Thank you, everyone.
See you.
later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.